All right, hello. Let's get started with the 2024 mathematics test now. I'm going to be going over Invitational A, trying to guide you through it to the best of my abilities, and having equations to help show you what I did to get the answer. Let's begin. Okay, starting off with your number one. Luke Page, Ryan Elliott went and ordered two large pizzas for $15.95, two Coke for $5.95. Shared the cost equally, a tax rate of 8.125% and a 25% after tax tip. How much did Luke, one person, pay? First off, we got to calculate how much they spent. This needs another parentheses to make sense, but essentially, you bought two pizzas, two Cokes, and it's multiplied by the tax rate, one plus the tax rate basically to keep the original value. The 1.08125, and then 1.25 for the after-tax tip. Once again, keeping the original value and adding on 25%. And then you divide by 4 because they share the cost equally and there are 4 people, and you get 14.86, or 80 actually. Calhoun Math Team did a fundraiser in October. Stacy's favorite band agreed to come. Student tickets cost $12.50. Adults cost $21.50. There are 498 tickets sold, and they made 9,213. How many adults tickets were sold? Well, this is a systems of equations, which we can use the matrices for. Basically, it's student tickets plus adult tickets equals 498 total tickets. Then the cost for each adds up to 1913. So plug this into your matrix, edit matrix 2 by 3, plug in all the values, and then go to math and then scroll up until you get to RF. Put in the matrix again, and you will get the value of the cost of the adult ticket should be the one with the second. You see how the second line has 0, 1? This one represents the adult ticket seen here and here. That's the second one, or you can just choose the one that actually appears on the answer choices. Regardless, you get a value of 332. Okay, triangle ABC. Point 4B lies on perpendicular bisector BC. B is equal to what? Well, first, to find the perpendicular bisector, we first have to find the bisector. So in that case, we have to find the midpoint. Midpoint of y's, there's an 8, there's a negative 8. Add them together, divide by 2, and you get a midpoint of y equals 0. And then x value of 4, x value of 6, add them together, divide by 2, and you get 5. So now that we have our point, we need to figure out our slope that will be taken perpendicular of. Well, it goes down 16 and over 2, so the slope is negative 16 over 2, or negative 8. To make a perpendicular bisector, you have to take the reciprocal and multiply by negative 1. So 1/8 x minus 5 plus 0, basically, is equal to y. And then plug in 4, and you get negative 0.125. Find the perimeter of the triangle. We have a program for this. Stat edit all the points in. Put the x values in L1 and y values in X2. Make sure that they correspond to the correct point. You don't have negative 8 as your first x, and then 8 as your first y over here. That doesn't make sense. If you do that, it'll run the shoelace formula and give you both the perimeter and the area of your triangle, which are these two things respectively. Point D, not shown, lies on AB. If CD is the median from point C to the side AB, then what is CD? Basically, it's just asking what is the length of the median. So we can use our program, another program for this to find for median length. In this case, sorry, I scrolled down. You'll have to use special segments, and then you'll look for median, and then you'll have to plug in all 3 of your sides, which unfortunately you're going to have to figure out by Pythagorean theorem. It takes a bit. Change in x, change in x, change in y, square those values, square root it, and you get the side length. Hopefully you remember that formula from like algebra or something. But if you do all that for all the changes in x and changes in y's, you'll get a value of 12.0. 7. The roots of ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d are -2, 1, and 3. If a is equal to 2, then what is c? Okay, here's how things work. Here's how things generally work in this case. The number close, or the coefficient closest to the highest coefficient is the sum of the roots. Or I guess it's technically it's the sum of the roots taken 2 at a time. This is the sum of the roots taken 2 at a time. This is the sum of the roots taken 3 at a time. Actually, this is negative the sum of the roots and negative the sum of the roots taken 3 at a time, because all the roots are opposite of how it would be written in the equation. For example, if you had a roots of -2 and 1, you'd write x plus 2 times x minus 1. So that's where the discrepancy forms. It forms from the values put in the equation being opposite of the roots. However, since the roots are taken 2 at a time here, the double negatives cancel each other out. And now we have to take the sum of the roots taken 2 at a time, or multiply 2 roots and add them all together. So that will get you c over a, actually, because you can imagine if everything was x plus, x minus, a would have a value of 1, but you're multiplying by 2. So basically, you just have to multiply whatever value you would get for the sum of the roots taken 2 at a time, and multiply by 2 as well to counteract that. So in that case, you just do that. -2 times 1 plus 1 times 3 minus 2 times 3 gets you c over a, which is -5. So c is going to be -10. Number of fleas in a house is directly related to the number of dogs and inversely related to the square of the number of ferrets. London's house has 420 fleas, 6 dogs, 2 ferrets. If other dude's house has 4 ferrets and 8 dogs, how many fleas are in his house? Okay, well, in this case, this is a equation for I don't even know what you would really call it. It's a proportion equation. So we know that the number of fleas is directly related to the number of dogs. Since it's directly related, you multiply some unknown k value by that. And then inversely related to the square of the number of ferrets. Since it's inversely related, we divide it by the square of ferrets. That's the definition of directly and inversely related. So now you plug in the value for Landon to figure out this unknown multiplied factor you have. The 240 is equal to k times 6 over 2 squared, and you get k is equal to 160. Now you just plug it back into the equation with your new data, and you get 80 fleas. Okay, 9. When 2x cubed plus, I'm not reading out all that, is divided by x plus 2, the remainder is what? Well, an interesting fact about these kind of dividing by a singular x and then a number plus a number, so x plus 2, is I can plug in the reciprocal or the negative version of this number. So +2 goes to -2, and that's your remainder. I don't remember quite why it works. I could probably prove it to you with enough time, but this isn't a proof video. It's just telling you how to solve everything. If you want more proofs, ask me in person, or ask some of the other people on the Math UIL group. Matthew is taking linear algebra this year at Southwestern University during 7th period. Each of the 4 test grades count once, the final exam counts twice, and he needs at least a 90% average to earn an A. What's the minimum score required to earn an A? Well, the average of your scores is going to be the sum of all those scores divided by the total number of tests. Hopefully you know that, because I imagine you've calculated your average a few times for school. In that case, so you got to add up all the test grades, and then the final exam counts twice, so you have to multiply by 2 times your unknown value, and then you have to divide it by 6, because there are technically 6 grades being counted, the 4 original tests and the final counted twice. Divide by 6, and that has to be equal to 90.0. Put that in EQ solver, and you'll get a score of 92 that's needed. Point A, B, C, and D lie on circles such that BD intersects AC at point E. B equals 4, A equals 6, D equals 9, and what is CE? Well, and another quirk about, honestly, I should really learn how to prove some of these geometry formulas. Probably be a fun experiment if you can do it as well. But for now, you just need to know that when chords intersect each other at a certain point, the distance between one side and that point times the distance from that point to the other side is equal for both of the chords. In other words, if this is E, AE times EC is equal to BE times ED. So now we just plug it into that equation. BE, 4, times DE, which is 9, is equal to AE, which is 6, times some unknown CE. And you solve for x, and you get a value of 6.0. Points F, G, H, and I lie in a circle such that HF intersects IG at point J. Minor arcs GF and IH with GF equal 88 and IH equal 808. What is measurement of HJG, which is this value right here? So here's another fact about all this stuff. The entire circle has to add up to 360 degrees. If you've watched any of my calculator videos, you know that to be the case. There are 360 degrees in a circle. That means the measurement of these two things combined has to be equal to 360 minus the length of these two arcs. And then another fact about the circle is that these two angles are the same, but 2 times the angle has to be equal to both of these two arcs. Basically, it kind of like, if the angle is at the center, the measurement of the arc is same as the measurement of the central angle. But even if it's offset a bit, the dual-sidedness kind of counteracts it. Once again, I don't know the proof for it. Figure it out yourself, or ask, maybe Ivan would know it. Or maybe you can go to Wikipedia. I'm sure they have a good proof for you. Or I might just figure it out myself if you ask. I don't know. In any case, you just do that. Subtract the two sides, divide by 2, because it's dual-sided angle, and it's a vertical angle, so they're the same. And if you do that, you get an angle of 82 degrees. Okay, triangle ABC is similar to triangle DEF, shown here, and I plugged in all the points for you to hopefully help you visualize it easier. Find the perimeter of DEF. Well, you know that it's similar, so any value from ABC has to be multiplied by some value to get that corresponding side on DEF. In this case, this 20 goes to this 15, so it has to be multiplied by 15 over 20. So, as a result, you can take the perimeter of ABC and then multiply it by 15 over 20 as well. If you do that, you get a perimeter of 42.0. Okay, and then what is CG? It's given that BG is the bisector of this angle right here. So another aspect of angle bisectors is that basically the distance from these 2 points has to, first off, it has to add up to the 14 that we talked about earlier, but it's also based on this 20 and this 22, because if you try to imagine it based on the law of sines, you're multiplying this unknown side divided by this angle, which is the same over here, and then you're multiplying it by this angle, or sine of this angle, which is going to be the same, because it's 180 degrees minus that. That gets you the 22 or 20. So in other words, the length of these has to be proportional on both sides. So 20 over GC has to be equal to 22 over AG. Hopefully that made sense, but I'll give you the formula now. Basically, you have to take the average, or the proportion of this 20 over this entire 20 or 42 combined, and multiply by the entire 14 length of this segment, and you will get a CG of 6.7, or 6.6 repeating, I believe, is the exact answer. Consider rhombus PQRS, with PR is equal to that and QS is equal to that. What is the area of a rhombus? Okay. Since it's a rhombus, that means, first off, I'll just tell you, an area of a rhombus is the two diagonals, which these two are, PR and QS, times each other divided by 2. Now this comes because the fact that these diagonals form 4 right triangles. So in other words, you're multiplying this over 2 times that over 2 times 4 divided by 2 because it's a triangle, and then multiplying it by the 4 triangles. That's where this equation comes from. I'm feeling bad about not being able to prove a lot of stuff on geometry, so I'm telling you that to hopefully help you. Large cylindrical container has a diameter of 4 feet and a height of 8 feet. What is the total area of the cylinder? Well, that total area is basically the same thing as your surface area. So you need, first off, a cylinder has 2 circles at the top and bottom, and then the, what do you call it? I don't really know what it's called, but you know the part of the area that's not the 2 circles at the top and bottom. So in that case, you need to do your area of your circle equation. So 4 feet over 2 squared times pi, and then times the 2 circles. And then your equation for that non-straight piece of the cone or cylinder, which is based on the circumference of the circle at the top or bottom, multiplied by your height. So your diameter or your circumference of 4 times pi, and then multiplied by 8. Do that, you get a value of 126 feet squared. And then how many gallons of water are required to completely fill it? Gallons are based on volume, so we need to figure out the volume of this thing right here. Well, volume of a cylinder is r squared times pi times height. So you do r squared times pi times your height. And then you have to convert it to from feet squared to inches squared. That means multiplying by 12 power to 3. And then there are 231 cubic inches in a gallon, so you have to divide by 231 to convert to gallons. Hopefully, there's a good chance you'll have this formula memorized the more tests you take, because it appears very often on math tests, and number sense tests for that matter. But yeah, that's the equation for it, that's the reasoning, let's go. Consider a circle with center O and diameter BD. Chord AC is perpendicular to BD. AC intersects BD at point E. Given AC is equal to 80, BD is equal to 32, find the area of this triangle. So I kind of mapped out the entire thing for you. AC is equal to 80 and this BE is equal to 32. Now now it doesn't tell you which side specifically B and D are on. However, you know that it's given that BD is the diameter, and there's no way a chord can be longer than the diameter. That doesn't make any sense. So as a result, if this BE came or crossed through the center of the circle, like if it was right here, for example, that would mean that the diameter would be smaller than the chord. So therefore, BE has to be above the center of the circle, or below it, but it doesn't cross through it. Now that you have that, we can use our equivalent chords equation mentioned before. The diameter is still technically a chord. So, and since this is perpendicular and this is diameter, this means that it separates the segment AC in two. Because hopefully you can imagine just drawing a triangle. Hopefully you can see it visualized as to why it has to be the same distance if this angle is a right angle. Oh, now that you get that, you get a value of DE to have 50. And then once you do that, you can do a lot of other stuff. Now that you know BE plus ED will get you the diameter, divide by 2 to get the radius. So 50 plus 32 is 82, divide by 2 is 41. Your radius is 41 now. So now you need the thing of OEC, the area of that triangle. So OE clearly has to be BO minus BE, as hopefully you can see. So 41 minus 32 is equal to 9. This is a right angle. And like we said, this is half of the entire 80 length chord. The equation is 9 times 40 over 2, as seen here. And then find the length of minor arc CD. In this case, you do have to figure out this angle right here and realize that the measure of these two angles are equivalent because this is a diameter. We already talked about it. Everything's basically symmetric because it's perpendicular and diameter and all that stuff. So you need to figure out this angle right here and multiply by 2. Well, you know the side is 40, you know the radius is 41. Sine inverse of 40 over 41 will work just fine. Multiply it by 2 to get this entire angle. Subtract that, the entire 360 degrees of a circle by that, and then divide by 2 to get only one of these sides. And that gives you the measure of CD. However, the length of CD is a bit different. Since the entire circle is 360 degrees, like I mentioned, the proportion of the circumference this segment or this arc encompasses is going to be equivalent to the measurement divided by the entire 360 degrees in a circle. So circumference of your circle times your angle over 360 degrees. Do that, you get a length of 73.5. 20, PS is tangent to the circle at point X. PQ is equal to 16, QR is equal to 22. What is PS? Welcome to here's another geometry problem that I don't know the proof for, but I know the formula for. Sorry if this is seeming really boring. I won't blame you for thinking that, but things get cooler towards the middle and end of the test. So in other words, the equation is basically the part outside of the circle times the entire segment, PR, has to be equal to the same thing for another tangent line. So basically what that means is PQ times PR, so 16 times 16 plus 22, has to be equal to the part outside the circle for this times the part outside and inside of the circle for this. Well, there's no part inside the circle, so those two things are the same. So you can just assign it to some unknown x squared value, solve for x, and you get 24.7. Leonardo has 24 marbles that are identical in size but vary in color. 20 of them are green, 2 are red, 2 are blue. How many different ways can he arrange them? Well, basically what this means is if all the marbles were able to successfully be seen distinct, the number of ways they could be arranged in a row would be 24 marbles times the 23 left over times 22 left over after that, etc., or 24 factorial. However, because there are two of them that are, because there are some of them that are identical, the amount of ways they can show up, essentially that are distinguishable, is cut down by the number of the same factorial. Because if you imagine, how should I put it? 2 red marbles, you couldn't tell whether the first red marble was first or second. So there's 2 ways that you can do it that are indistinguishable, so you have to divide by 2. And then that works for more of them. There are 20 factorial ways the green marbles can technically have a different order but not be distinguishable. So you're just doing 24 factorial and dividing by all the factorials of the colors. Do that, you get 63,756 ways. Consider the sequence, find the sum of the first 19 terms. Well, what this series is doing is it's adding 4 to the previous number. That's the equivalent of the sum from 1 to 19 of 3 plus 4x, and you'll get a value of 817. This sequence is a little more complicated, but it's not that bad. As you can hopefully see, each number is the previous one multiplied by 1.5. So the sum from 1 to 11 of your original value, 4 times 1.5 power to x minus, why did I write 2? X minus 1, sorry. So the first one will be 4 times 0 as we want. Do that, you get a value of 684.0. Measure of an interior angle of a regular polygon is 35 degrees, length of each side is 12. Find the area of the polygon and find the area of the circle inscribed in the polygon. Well, the interior angle of a polygon is equal to 180 minus 360 over the number of sides. Plug in 135 for that, and you'll see that it's an octagon. And then you can use your equation for area of a regular polygon, which is your side squared times your number of sides over 4 over tangent of 180 over your number of sides. And this 4 is always constant, by the way. So you do that, you get an area of 695. And then find the area of the circle that is described in the polygon. I tried to show what that would look like. As you can see, I'm not that good at it for drawing. Basically, that means that the radius of the circle goes to the center of one of the sides of the octagon. Therefore, since you know the side length of the octagon, you can figure out this side right here with tangent, or cotangent in a way. So this angle is 180 over 8. That's the reason why this formula works as it is. Tire 360 degrees divided by number of sides divided by 2, because it's dual-sided. So tangent of 180 over 8. Since you're looking for adjacent given opposite, you need to make it cotangent by powering it to -1. Do not do inverse tangent. That is not correct. And then you have to multiply it by this side length right here, which is going to be the length of one side divided by 2. And that'll get you the radius of your circle. Then you do r squared times pi, and you get 659. 26, f of x is that, g of x is that. What is f inverse of 2 minus g inverse of 2? Well, you could find out the equation given f and g of x and then solve for x, or you can just do it the easy way and plug these equations into EQ solver and figure out what points they're equal to 2. So that's pretty much what inverse means. It's what x value gets you y. So then you'll get the points 2.75, and then you'll be subtracting -0.833. And that's in fraction form, that's 3 and 7/12. Consider the function g of x is equal to that. What is the range of g of x? Technically, there is an error on this, but the intention is obvious. Basically, what the actual answer should be is 0 square root of 5 over 3, and then an open bracket, and then union, open bracket, square root of 5 over 3, and then infinity. Basically, it's never actually square root of 5 over 3, but the intention is clearly obvious when you look at the graph. So sometimes when you're given stuff like this, you should just plug it into y1 and figure out and find some interesting info about it. You can find that -4 over 5 makes the function equivalent to 0. You can also plug that in to prove it. And you also know that if you put in 0, this denominator is 0, so the function is infinity. So as a result, it can go from 0 all the way to infinity. That's the only thing that really makes sense. And also, since it's the square root, it can never be negative. Okay, consider a polynomial function. If f of -1 is 20, then what is d? Well, just plug in -1 to this equation and figure out what this value right here is. Easy enough, done right here. Just takes a bit. How many roots does the polynomial have? This is another one where you just got to plug into y1 and observe. You can zoom in and out to make sure you're not missing any roots. And if you do that, you'll find that you have 3 real roots. On June 1st of 2018, 25K is put into account, earning 7.5% interest monthly. Dude is going to withdraw it 6 years later and need to pay 38,773.56 cents. So, and how much money will he have to come up with on his own? Well, we got to figure out how much interest has multiplied his money. So his rate is 0.0725. The formula for interest is 1 plus your rate powered to your time. However, when it's compounded a certain amount of times, you have to divide by the amount of times it's compounded in a year, and then multiply your time by, or convert your time to, in this case, months. So if you do that, you'll get and subtract that from the entire cost, you'll get a value of $200 left. 31. Watt is playing standard 5-card poker, each using a standard deck of 52 cards. What's the probability he will be dealt a hand with at least one queen? Well, the probability that he'll have at least one queen is 1 minus the probability that he doesn't have a queen, since he either can or cannot have a queen. So let's figure out the probability he doesn't have a queen. Well, the first draw would have to not be a queen, so 48 over 52. That's one card out of the deck. You have to run the same odds again. There are 4 queens, so 4 minus all the cards. And you continue that for all 5 cards he gets in his hand. And you get a value of 0.341. Okay, what is the period of this equation? Well, the period of a normal cosine is 2 pi, but multiplying, since x is being multiplied by something, that means the period or the distance between the repetition has to be divided by that value. So that you have to divide the normal 2 pi by this pi over 3 here. And if you do that, you get a period of 6. 6 chairs are in a row, 6 students sit in the chairs, and if Seth wants to sit next to Doreen, how many distinct seating arrangements are possible? Well, since Seth wants to sit next to Doreen, it's best to imagine them as one person instead of two. So now you have 5 people in a row. Well, 5 factorial is 120. That's the number of ways it could be in a row, because you could have 5 people at first, then 4 people, then 3 people, then 2 people, etc. Now, once we treat Seth and Doreen as the same person, Seth can either be before or after Doreen. So you have to multiply back by 2 factorial. So if you do that, you'll get a value of 240 seating arrangements possible. Okay, Ariana leaves Georgetown, flies on 2010 degrees for 120 miles, then travels at 300 degrees for 180 miles and lands at a different airport. For 4 days, she flies back. She travels at 112 miles per hour. How much time does it take? Well, to figure out how far she is from her home, we need to use Pythagorean theorem, as seen here, to figure out the distance. So we need our change in x and change in y. Well, the cool thing about bearings is that they work such that putting cosine and sine of them inside of them will successfully get you the change. Technical, think about it. Okay, technically I believe this is actually change in y and this is change in x. However, for this problem, it doesn't actually make a difference. But so in any case, you can swap those, I think, because bearing starts at 0 degrees up here, which would be sine of 90, and cosine, or sine of, which would be equivalent of 90 degrees. So you do that, you figure out the change in x by multiplying your degrees by, or your appropriate function times 0 degrees times your distance. Do that for your x and y, and then square root of each of the values squared to get you your distance, and then divide by your speed. Distance over speed equals time. Do that, and you'll get like 1.9 something hours, or 1 hour and 56 minutes. Hard drive disk with diameter of 3.5 inches, operating at 7,200 rotations per minute. What is the linear velocity of a point on the outer edge of the disk? Well, first off, we need to figure out how far it travels. Well, it rotates 7,200 times per minute, and for it to rotate, it has to travel the length of the circumference. So let's figure out the circumference of your disk. Circumference is 2 times pi r, or diameter times pi, so 3.5 pi. And then we're going to, since we're looking for miles per hour, we're going to convert it to miles, divide by 12 to convert to feet, divide by 5280, convert to miles, and then you have to multiply by the number of rotations per minute. Since there are 60 minutes an hour, you have to multiply by another 60 to figure out how much happens in an hour. Do that, you get a value of 75 miles per hour. 36, the equation of an ellipse centered at 4, 2 with vertices 0, 2, and 8, 2. Centricity of that is this giant equation here. What is E? Okay, it's important to note that this equation, or this entire thing, is kind of stupid, because you can just divide all these values by whatever you want. So you can consider that an error. If it said that they had to all be integers, that would change, however, and it would work. You'd have to write that they're all integers, basically. So we know that it's centered at 4, 2, and the vertices are 0, 2, and 4, or 8, 2. That means that the x distance is 4. That means that A would be kind of 1 over 16. However, we're going to, you know what? Yeah, I'll just say it's 1 over 16 and continue my analysis as to why. The eccentricity of an equation is the change in x slash y, or the change in the larger axis, or square root of the change in the larger axis squared minus the change in the smaller axis. all over the larger axis. So we know the larger axis is 4, because that's where the vertices are. And then, so if you subtract the eccentricity squared, you will get the part that goes onto a squared, basically. I'll get to that in a minute, but first you should imagine this as 1 over 16, and this as 1 over 9. So then you have to counteract the x and change it to like you're given an x value, so you need to, or you're given a center, so a has to be multiplied by x minus 4. If you were to get rid of the cx and dx, so we can properly figure out e. So basically the equation, so then you do that, and do that for your x and y, subtract it to make your center, and you get not, and that, and here's why you write 9 and 16. You see that this a would normally be 1 over 16. This would be normally be 1 over 9, and therefore this would normally be 1. That's kind of how circles are written. So 4 squared, which is the distance, over 16 would get you 1. However, what you can imagine is we multiplied both sides by 16 and 9. So the 16 is canceled out, and the 9 is being multiplied now. The 9 was canceled out, and 16 is being multiplied now. So that's kind of why it's swapped. And then that has to be equal to 9 times 16. So then you need to figure out this e value, which is basically the amount not counteracted by removing cx and dy. In other words, it's e plus negative 4 squared plus negative 2 squared gets you the 9 times 16. So you have to subtract it back. So you're doing that right here. 9 times 4 squared plus 16 times 2 squared minus 9 times 16 will get you e. I did it reverse way because e is moved over. Sorry if it was a bit hard to explain. Hopefully I can explain it better in person if you're still confused. But let's move on. The y-intercept of the graph of this equation is negative 6 over 2 sine of x minus cosine of x. And it's at 0, obviously. X equals 0, what is the b value? Well, sometimes the easiest way to do it is, like I said, just plug it into y1 or r1 in this case and look at it. Go to mode, switch to polar equations, plug in the equation, make sure you're in radians, and you'll clearly see that the y-intercept is at y equals negative 3. 38, find the angle between vectors. The angle between vectors is basically equivalent to the dot product over the Pythagorean of these two vectors. In other words, 3 times 4 plus 5 times 7 over square root of 3 squared plus 5 squared over square root of 4 squared plus 7 squared. And then you have to take cosine inverse of that. And if you do that, you'll get a value of 1.2. Then consider the curve represented by the parametric equations x equals 2 over cosine of x and y is equal to 4 tangent of x. What is the distance between the foci? So how foci work is basically you're given, it's the distance of x squared plus the, it's hard to say distance in y squared, but what the distance of y squared would be if it was an ellipse, basically. In other words, we need to figure out so there's multiple ways to do it. You can potentially know these kind of things and convert it to an actual parametric equation. You can also plug it in. See that the distance from each of the two x from the middle at x equals 0 is 2. And then the graph will also show you a line pretty close to the like what do you call it? Why can't I think? I'm sorry. The asymptote, which represents y over x, basically. So since the slope is 2, the change in y theoretically would be 4. So now that you have that, do Pythagorean theorem like we mentioned, multiply by 2 because that's we got the distance from the foci to the center, so you have to multiply by 2, and you get 8.9. Find the distance between this point and this plane. That's basically the exact same thing as this problem right here. Well, not exactly at all, actually, except you're not taking cosine inverse. So you're doing the dot product, 1 times 2 minus, or plus 2 times negative 3, plus 3 times 5. Then you also have to subtract the value on this side. That's just a thing you gotta know. And then you have to divide it by the Pythagorean theorem of all these sides. So 2 squared plus 3 squared plus 5 squared. Do that and you get a distance of 1.1. 41, given f of 0.5 is equal to 0.5, f of 6.5 is equal to 0.5, and f prime. What is the sum of the x values that satisfy the mean value theorem? Okay. The mean value theorem, for those who aren't in calculus, states that there's some point between the interval with the same slope, instantaneous slope at that point, as the average change, and as the average change of the function. Well, the average change is nu new y minus original y over the distance between the x values. So 0.5 minus 0.5 over 6, which is 0. In other words, when is this giant equation equal to 0? And that happens at x equals 1.5 and x equals 4.5. Consider the function h of x. What value of x is the slope of the line tangent to the graph equivalent to 2.2? The slope of the tangent line is going to be the same as the slope at a given point. When is the slope of 0.5 e powered to x equal to 2.2? Put it in an EQ solver, or realize that it's literally the derivative is literally the exact same equation, and figure out when it's 2.2, and you'll get 1.48. 43 and 44, you're given two graphs. You're given a quadratic graph and a linear graph. You can use stat edit to calculate the equations for both of them. Stat edit, calculate for quadratic and linear equations. Sort in y1 and y2, and now we can use some programs for this. In this case, since they're looking for area bounded and revolution, we can use our Oxor program. It's going to be able to find these inputs easily because the first one is at -10 and the other one is at 10, so they aren't going to overlap. They're both going to go to the nearest point as seen, or as I'm showing. So no input is required, and then the revolution line is stated down here is -4. And then it'll get you the hatched area and the solid revolution line, 14.2 and 606.6. 45, given this function f of x, what is the average value of the function? Average value of an equation is equal to the integral of that equation over the distance. So basically, we need to figure out the integral of this equation right here. Well, this is a bunch of shapes. A triangle with a length of 5 and height of 5, 25 over 2. A triangle with a length of 3 and height of 2, that's in negative, so minus 3 times 2 over 2. And then this triangle over here with the same methodology. And then you divide it by your distance of 10, and you get 23 over 20 as your answer choice. And then what is the value of the integral from -5 to 5 of f prime of x? Since f prime is the derivative and -5 to 5 is the integral and derivative cancel each other out. So all you're left with is f of 5 minus f of a -5. And that will get you a value of 2.0. Let f of x be the antiderivative of this equation. F of 4 is equal to 3. What is f of 12? Okay, just take the integral from 4 to 12 of this equation, because that's what it's looking for. And then you have to add it by the 3 that was originally there, because that's what antiderivative is. It's basically an integral without bounds. So yeah, give it your bounds, calculate the integral of that equation. This is technically not parentheses correct, but you clearly get what I'm doing. Then add it to the original 3 and you get 4.14. 48, given integral from 2 to -6 of fx is -7, integral from 2 to 8 is 9. What is the integral from -6 to 8? Well, first off, you should know that this is this is starting at a higher value and going to a lower value. We don't want that. That makes things annoying. So you should know that the integral from -6 to 2, which will help us and is correctly in order, is the same thing as the opposite of the integral from the two bounds reversed, because in this case, it's going from left to right to left. So in other words, integral from -6 to 2 is 7, and then integral from -6 to 8 is just going to be integral from -6 to 2 plus the integral from 2 to 8. You're just connecting the areas. So add those two together and you get a value of 16. Given this equation right here, At the point 1b, b is less than 0, what is the derivative of the equation? Well, in this case, we have a program for this, thankfully. Otherwise, you'd have to manually take the derivative with respect to y, which would be pretty annoying. So you gotta put it, first off, you gotta put in the equation y1. Yes, you can put in y. The program will understand that. You also have to subtract the 6. So you subtract 6 and make it equal to 0. Then go to diff eq. You're looking for the slope from the equation, and you're looking for the tangent slope. And then you're given a x value of 1. You're given that y is negative, so put a guess of y equals like negative 10. And you get a value of, excuse me, give me a sec. Well, I guess it's on here, but you get a value of 2.0. So yeah, that's how it works. And then 50 to 52, the position of the particle is given by the parametric equations, that and that. What is the velocity vector? Well, velocity is the derivative of position. So take the derivative of both of these equations and plug in 8, and then that will get you the velocity. No, you don't have to square these. Sorry for some writing errors. You don't have to square those things. You just get the value you need. You do have to square it for this, though. You need to figure out the speed. Well, the speed is going to be based on a hypotenuse in a sense. You're changing y, and what this is your change in y, and this is your change in x. So your speed is going to be square root of your velocity vector, each side squared. The Pythagorean theorem, basically. You do that, you get 3.3. As you can see, the 0.24 really does not do a lot to change the speed. And find the total distance traveled. Well, total distance, first off, like we said, the direction is based on x squared plus y squared. So you have to do the same thing, square root of x squared plus y squared. However, you have to do the derivative and take the integral of that to counteract it, because the distance traveled doesn't care about whether you're going in a positive or negative direction. So you have to go from the derivative, take the absolute value, which squaring it automatically does, and then find the integral from it. So you do that, and you'll get a value of 1.84. 53, you're given a bunch of scores and tests that this piece of data isn't relevant, just for reference. Find the sum of the mean, median, and mode. So you got to plug in all the scores into stat edit, then go on to calculate and do one variable stats, and that'll get you basically everything you need, except you still got to figure out mode. It'll get you mean and median. And then you'll have to manually see that 337 appears twice, so it's appeared the most. Add up all those values together, you get 1007. And how many scores are outliers? Well, you can either calculate this manually. If let's imagine you want the lower outliers, stuff too low to be considered not an outlier. Well, first off, you got to figure out the distance between the third quartile and the first one. You have to multiply by 1.5. And you have to take the first quadrant and subtract that value from it. And then if you're looking for the higher thing, you do a similar thing. Look at the third quadrant and add 1.5 times the difference. Alternatively, you can just plug this into, you can go to second, go to stat plot, use the fourth graph which shows outliers, and then you search for any dots in the data. And you'll have to zoom out to see it, because it's going to have these x values. So if you do that, you'll get a outlier of 0, or you will not find any outliers at all. The 5 bottling company has a mean is making soda. The mean length is 2 liters and standard deviation of 0.02. They placed a large order, and when shipment arrived, managers randomly selected 12 bottles and measured the amount of soda in each bottle. If 3 or more bottles have less than 1.96, shipment is rejected. Find the probability that this order was rejected. First off, we got to figure out the probability that a bottle has less than 1.96 liters. That's going to be your normal CDF definition. So you're looking for anything lower, so you don't have a lower bound. Your upper bound is going to be the 1.96, and you need your mean is 2, and your standard deviation is 0.02. And that will get you the probability of having a bad bottle. Then the probability of having 3 or more bad bottles is equal to 1 minus the probability of having 2 or less bad bottles. So that's what binomial CDF will do. It'll ask you for the number of trials, which is the 12 bottles selected, the probability of being a bad bottle, and then the maximum scenario we're looking for. So this will cover scenarios for 0, 1, and 2 bottles having less than 1.96 liters. So if you do that, you will get a value of 0.0022. 56, you're given a stat plot. You have to plot the x's, plot the y's, and then you generate a linear relationship or a linear model. And what is the residual for 50 miles per week in 7.5 minutes? So basically you have to figure out the residual is the difference between what you suggest and what your data plot suggests, or what your data line suggests, and what it actually is. So 17.5 is what it actually is. However, the model predicts it's going to be a little bit higher. So the difference between that is 0.123. So that's your answer. And then what is the time predicted by an LSRL if Arian increases his mileage to 80 miles per week? Well, just see what the graph predicts at 80 miles per week. Do that, move on, you get 14.95. Survey asks a random sample of 500 California high school students to name favorite college mascot. 39% selected Willie the Wave. What is a 90% confidence interval for the proportion of all California high school students? Well, in this case, we can use one of our mini stat tests. So stat test, and then this is based on one probability, so it's a one prop interval. So scroll down a lot till you get the one prop z-int. And then the number of people who chose it are, well, 39% times your 500 people total. There are 500 people who answered it. And your confidence level is 0.9, and that will get you the confidence interval of 0.354 and 0.2 or 426, which is clearly this right here. It was probably just rounded, you know. So let's go on to the last one, the last set. You're given a score and you're given the probability of each score. Well, it basically shows the frequency of each score. So put the scores into L1, the probability is into L2, and then do one var stats with L2 as the frequency list. And that will get you a mean of 4.13 and a standard deviation of 0.997. All right, I hope you enjoyed the guide. If you have any questions, either ask me in person, leave a comment, ask anyone else on the team. And if you want more detail or more in-depth understanding of the problem, you can do any of those things again. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be coming out with more videos in a few days. See you later.